Okay, let's talk about student loans. Just saying those two words can make your shoulders tense up a little bit, right? It's a huge topic, and it's usually all about numbers and deadlines and stress. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if the real key to handling student loans isn't in a spreadsheet, but in something much, much deeper? Let's dive in. But before we even get into interest rates, let's pull the camera way back for a second and ask a bigger question. You look around and our society is filled with highly educated people. I mean, people with PhDs and advanced degrees everywhere. But are we seeing more peace? Are we seeing more wisdom? It often feels like there's a fundamental disconnect between all this learning and a truly peaceful life. And this quote right here, it just perfectly captures the diagnosis from our source material. The argument is that when education just focuses on information, on making us clever, but it separates that knowledge from a moral and spiritual foundation, well, it completely misses the point. It ends up creating people who are smart, for sure, but who lack the actual wisdom that leads to a peaceful life. So, if that's the problem, what's the alternative? Well, it brings us to this incredibly powerful, ancient concept: stewardship. And no, this isn't just some fancy word for making a budget. It's about looking at our responsibilities, including our finances, through the lens of a higher calling. The principle of stewardship really starts with this idea that everything we have, our time, our talents, our money, is a resource that's been entrusted to us. And from this perspective, even debt isn't automatically this evil thing. It's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used wisely for growth and purpose, or it can be used foolishly and cause a lot of damage. Now, what's so fascinating is that this isn't some new financial philosophy. We can actually find timeless wisdom that applies directly to today's really complex problems in some very, very old stories. So let's look at three parables that speak directly to the issue of debt and how we handle our money. First up, we have the parable of the talents. This story gives us a powerful framework for completely shifting our perspective, to see a student loan not as a trap, but as a potential investment in our own future. So the story is pretty straightforward. A master gives his servants his money to look after. Two of them get to work, they invest it wisely, and they double it. Awesome. But the third servant, he gets paralyzed by fear. He just buries his share in the ground and gains absolutely nothing. When the master comes back, you can guess who he rewards: the two who took a calculated risk to grow what they were given. And this story reveals a huge difference in mindset. The common worldly view screams that all debt is a trap, something to be avoided at all costs. That's the fearful servant, right? But a godly, stewardship-based view sees it differently. A student loan that's used to gain a skill or a degree that actually increases your ability to earn and to serve others, that's not a trap. That's an investment. It's a talent you've been given to multiply. But wise investment is only one side of the coin. Our second case study, the story of Elisha and the widow, is a really powerful cautionary tale. It shows us the dangers of borrowing without having a plan. In this story, a widow's husband dies, leaving the family with a debt so crushing that creditors are literally on their way to take her sons into slavery. I mean, this is a full-blown crisis, and it was born from unplanned borrowing. Now, a miracle does save them in the end, but the story is a stark reminder of the devastating harm that debt can cause when it's not handled with wisdom. So, the whole point here is about having foresight. The common approach is often, you know what, just sign the papers, I'll figure it out later. But the wise approach insists that you understand what you're signing, the interest rate, the repayment terms, before you take on the debt. It's about being a responsible owner from day one. Okay, so we have investment and we have caution. Our final story, the famous parable of the Good Samaritan, adds a third, absolutely crucial element to our financial mindset: compassion. We all know this one. A man is beaten and left for dead. A Samaritan not only stops to help, but uses his own money to pay for the man's lodging and his medical care, and he even promises to cover any future costs. This isn't an investment for him, it's a pure act of compassion. So how does this connect to student aid? Well, a transactional view just sees financial aid as a cold exchange of funds, but a godly perspective reframes it. Programs like grants, scholarships, or even subsidized loans can be seen as modern expressions of compassion. It's a community helping those in need get an education they otherwise couldn't afford. So we've got these three powerful principles from the parables: investment, caution, and compassion. But they are not just abstract ideas. They can directly guide the practical, real-world choices we all face with student loans today. Let's take a look at how. First, let's just get our terms straight. A subsidized loan is designed for students with a demonstrated financial need. And here's the key benefit, which ties right back into that idea of compassion we just talked about. The government pays the interest for you while you're in school. That is a huge advantage.
Then you have the unsubsidized loan, which is available to most students, no matter what their need is. But here's the key difference, and it's a big one. With this loan, you are responsible for paying all the interest that builds up from the moment you take out the loan, even while you're still studying.
So let's put them side by side. The core difference is who pays the interest while you're in school. With a subsidized loan, the government covers it. With unsubsidized, you do. That one distinction is why the subsidized loan is always the better option if you qualify. Understanding this can save you thousands of dollars. So here's how we put it all together into an actionable 5-step plan. 1. Research the costs. 2. Seek out free money like grants first. That's the compassion principle from the Good Samaritan right there. 3. Remember the widow's debt and have a repayment plan before you borrow. 4. Like the wise servants, practice managing what you have now by budgeting. And 5. Don't do it alone. Seek wisdom from God and from mentors you trust. We've covered a lot of practical tactics, but our source material is very clear that the ultimate solution isn't found in a better calculator or repayment plan. It's about a complete transformation of our mindset. This verse from the book of Romans really gets to the heart of it. Be responsible, be diligent to pay what you owe, but never ever forget that your greatest lifelong debt is to love and care for the people around you. Your financial responsibility is supposed to serve that greater purpose. And this brings us right to the foundational idea for this entire approach. The source contrasts two mindsets. The first is what it calls carnally minded, which is basically a worldly approach focused on fear or greed or just scrambling to get by. That path, it argues, leads to chaos. The alternative is a spiritually minded approach, and that is what brings life and peace. So the main point is this. The real solution to our financial anxieties and our bad decisions isn't just a better system. It's a transformed mind. It's an approach to life and to learning that is rooted in God's wisdom, purpose, and stewardship. That is the true path to a life of peace. And so that's the question this whole explainer leaves us with. It challenges us to look beyond our bank accounts and loan statements and ask a much deeper question. In all our striving and all our learning, are we building on a foundation of fear and worldly thinking, or are our lives, our education, and our choices rooted in that which brings true life and peace?